блокнотик с ручкой.
Да вроде у меня, ну, хотя дайте блокнотик.
Дай мне одну.
Четвертую историю, блондинка. Вот когда у нас вопросы зала пойдут, вот ей нужен вопрос с первого слова.
Ага,
Да, вот
понял,
это
понял.
Камельковая Алексей.
А у нас то, ага.
О, куда он делал?
Здрасте, здрасте. Да, отлично, отлично. Да, по плану вы где-то в конце.
Такой потребительский срез.
Да, да.
Отлично.
Да, опросы как раз расскажете.
Что происходило?
Угу.
Чисто сознание.
Ага, хорошо, хорошо. Здрасте. А у нас что, выступающие как-то... Просто есть люди, которые... Надо пригласить, да. Да, здрасте, здрасте. Ну, будем стараться. Стараться.
Да, мы планируем, да, будет концовый исправительный. Да, 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 потому что мы готовим сейчас как раз презентацию. Если думал, вам подъехать, отдельно с кем поговорить. Валер.
Они между собой договорятся, позвонила, да, кончилось. На вашу камеру.
Я уже платформу сделал.
Здравствуйте, да, я Сергей Прикольный. Здрасте.
Давайте.
У нас нет.
По старшинству.
По вопросам новых технологий. Мониторинг изучает. За эти вопросы тоже отчасти.
Понятно, отлично.
Очень эффективно студентка работает.
Да. Ну, у меня нет прямых. Присаживайтесь.
Замечательно.
Вот. У меня нет прямых преемственностей. И как бы та же самая позиция совсем. Более широкой ответственности. Но, к сожалению, часть этой ответственности тоже, да. тоже наше. С удовольствием, дайте попьем чай, обсудим.
Как бы, хорош
Смотрите.
Найдем вообще, ну, сейчас Зеля как это все скажет. В смысле покажет?
В смысле покажет, это болтание. Хорошо. В подвале? Нет, я в здании находится.
Умное экспертное мнение никому никогда не мешало. Что я поддержу, да?
Старая, но
Ага.
он
Спасибо.
Да. Ну что, коллеги, прошу потихоньку.
So, colleagues, let us get seated and then get started. We start our discussion. My name is Vladimir Nazarov, Director of Finance Research Institute of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. I'm honored to moderate one of the most interesting discussions at this forum, which is regulating digital financial assets. But before we start, let us have a look at a short promo.
10 лет назад в интернете появилось описание первой действующей криптовалюты – биткоина. В ее основе лежала новая криптографическая технология – блокчейн. Сегодня существует уже более 1600 разных видов цифровых финансовых активов. Действует около 500 криптобирж, где идет торговля криптовалютами и токенами. Среднегодовая рыночная капитализация криптовалют приближается к 370 миллиардам долларов. А что же будет завтра? Что же такое цифровые финансовые активы? Вот их общие черты. Распределенный реестр цифровых транзакций, неизменяемость истории транзакций, невозможность отмены произведенного платежа, защищенный доступ владельцев активов к реестру, анонимность владельцев. Все это обеспечивает новая технология блокчейн. Работу блокчейна обеспечивают майнеры. Они проверяют каждую цифровую транзакцию, включают ее в распределенный реестр и хранят его копии на своих компьютерах. Для того, чтобы все копии были одинаковыми, используется алгоритм консенсуса. Без майнеров работа блокчейна невозможна. За свои услуги майнеры могут получать комиссию за транзакции и вознаграждение в виде автоматически создаваемых единиц криптовалюты. Это похоже на добычу золота из руды, откуда и название майнер, то есть шахтер. По некоторым оценкам, сегодня в мире действует более 150 тысяч майнеров. Для обработки биткоин-транзакций требуется более 10 тераватт электроэнергии в год. Это сопоставимо с годовым потреблением Уругвая, где проживает порядка 3 миллионов человек. Только в 2017 году майнеры купили более 3 миллионов графических процессоров. Какие потенциальные возможности открывает эта новая технология? Вот несколько примеров. Блокчейн может ускорить проведение расчетов и улучшить контроль над выполнением договоров в международной торговле и логистике. Например, покупатель товара сможет легко отслеживать его движение без риска подделки документов. Блокчейн позволяет надежно хранить информацию об объектах недвижимости и облегчать проведение сделок с ними. Механизм ICO и токены – перспективный инструмент доступного привлечения инвестиций для малых и средних компаний. Но помимо возможностей, новая технология несет в себе определенные риски. Использование криптовалют для отмывания преступных доходов и проведения других незаконных операций. Взлом криптокошельков и криптобирж хакерами. Угроза национальной финансовой стабильности из-за спекулятивных пузырей и финансовых пирамид на рынке криптоактивов. Так как же уменьшить эти риски, не тормозя развитие технологии? Одни страны признают криптоактивы и разрабатывают правовую базу для их включения в легальный оборот. Например, в США власти рассматривают криптовалюту в качестве имущества. В Германии криптовалютам присвоен статус альтернативных платежных средств. А в Эстонии установлены биткоин-банкоматы, и за криптовалюту можно купить квартиру. Но в некоторых странах криптоактивы запрещены. В Китае операции с криптовалютами и токенами находятся под запретом. В Румынии регулятор признал сделки с криптовалютой незаконными. А в Исландии гражданам запрещено покупать биткоины на криптобиржах. Практика регулирования не устоялась и еще только нарабатывается. Что же такое криптовалюты, токены и блокчейн? Сверхэффективная прорывная технология или просто мода? Если все это перспективная технология 21 века, то что нужно сделать, чтобы дать ей возможность развиваться и в то же время обеспечить пользователей? Каким путем нам стоит пойти и каково должно быть государственное регулирование данной сферы?
Ну, вот после того...
After this promo, one can get lost because the topic of digital economy is vast and the technology, even a minor piece of blockchain technology, even this topic can be tackled for a whole day. We can discuss where we can use it in registers or somewhere else, but here we have to outline the topic for our today's discussion. We are going to discuss solely digital financial assets and not deviate to discuss other interesting issues of digital technologies. Apart from that, we'll focus on regulating this new reality. That is why initially I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Dmitry Peskov, Russian President's Special Representative for Digital and Technological Development. I'd like Mr. Peskov to set the framework for our general discussion and to tell us about the tasks that the Russian government sets in terms of digital economy and digital financial assets. Mr. Peskov, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. The model is easy. We have global technological revolution, which displays various phenomena. One of them is a phenomenon of blockchain and cryptocurrency. Technological development should tackle several tasks: economic development, increasing living standards, and national security. These are the goals that we have, and in order to reach these goals, we use these sorts of assets. Then there is a question, what is more important? What is the priority? There is a beautiful Japanese word, ikigai. Japanese higai means the search for some average figure that will suit all the goals. That is why I search for decisions that will increase economic development, that will sustain living standards, and that will face all the three goals. This is what we need. Then, blockchain is a subdivision of a group of technologies of registers. No one can guarantee today that this sort of technology is stable. That is why the task to organize our long-term planning on a non-stable basis is impossible. For example, tomorrow, instead of blockchain, we have another sort of basis. We'll have another type of operating hash function. And what next? In this regard, our key task is to have a broader look at generally at the group of these registered technologies, then understand where do we need to work with them, with the assets that were proposed at the promo, I mean miners, crypto hype, and so on and so forth, and what does not need such effort. Key global vendors, for example, VM company, look for decisions that decrease blockchain down to corporate decisions. For example, what we today incorporate in in state bodies use Hibernate technology, which has little to do with classical blockchain. Then, digital financial assets. We require a rapid development, however, we do not have to be first. This is a simple strategy. We have been implementing it in the course of several years. Let us call this strategy rapid second. So, let us suppose that there is someone who implemented the technology and was the first to do so, and we just pick it up after them. This strategy makes it possible for us to escape key risks related to digital financial assets. If every person can be a center of a mission, and digital financial assets allow us to do so, it would mean that government loses its key functions, that it actually disappears. We could discuss it if we lived in a world of hipsters and pink ponies, but apart from them, we have some evil representations in the world and some other characters. That is why we need to use the decisions that are sustainable architecture I mean the decisions that we will not have to abandon tomorrow when another technology pops up and degrades our advantages. For example, quantum computer actually degrades blockchain decisions of first wave and creates an immense level of financial risks for them. Then B, use assistance where is needed today in case we need to cooperate with the mission centers, guarantee communication protocols between various stakeholders, and so on and so forth. And finally, C, the approach that the Ministry for Economic Development today deals with in the framework of Digital Economy Program. This is digital playgrounds, so to speak, that could be safe against legislational checks and risks and cooperation with other type of stakeholders in form of law enforcement bodies. So I repeat, assistance, search for decisions, and sandboxes. This is what builds up the strategy Rapid Second. Thank you. This is a good framework. It would be logical if we now give the floor to the Ministry of Finance, taking into account that together with Central Bank, they have done a lot in order to develop the corresponding pieces of legislation. That is why the floor goes to Yana Breskina, representative of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. What are the principles of building financial assets that you incorporated in the legislation that is being read in State Duma now, and what is the place of those financial digital assets in the global financial system of our country? Thank you. I'd like to support the introductory remark pronounced by my colleague. This is a new development, not quite studied, and as of today we do not have pronounced firsts who have accomplished their way and have drawn conclusions from their work. That is why when we were taking the decision to regulate or not and what approaches to pick up, we had to study all the global experience that was at our disposal. Our chief decision, together with Central Bank and executive authorities, was to regulate. We believe it is more dangerous to leave it for self-regulation. That is why we decided to lift the major approaches to the level of legislation. Such major approaches are our key terms like cryptocurrency, blockchain, smart contract, the terms that are needed to perform such deals. The key aspect here is the fact that digital financial assets cannot be used as means of payment here in the Russian Federation, where the only possible currency is Russian ruble. We stick to this position. We understand the position of Rosfin monitoring, of FAT, that we have to foresee countering the financing of terrorism, and we proposed a corresponding construction. We understand the risks related to digital financial assets. That is why this connection to other digital assets is the point where we have to execute our control. Another key aspect to start the regulating process, we have to protect non-qualified investors from those risks. It is about informational work and regulatory limitations and restrictions proposed by central bank on participation of non-qualified investors in the projects related to digital financial assets. So these were the major approaches. What is the place that digital financial assets are going to occupy and our financial system? Well, we'll see, time will show. We pay special attention to sandboxes that central bank deals with. We'll have to test them, to work with projects, to draw some conclusions, and then think about updating the legislation, think about amending it, and about possible, probable role and share in the economy.
Thank you, Yana. Indeed, I overlooked to mention one very important thing, because we have planned a lot of very interesting presentations, 12 of them. That's why please keep to the time frame. And before the presentation of the special representative of the president and you kept up to the time frame, thanks, but all the rest of you will have maximum 6 minutes, not more. And after that, I will say time is money, and I will pass the mic to the next speaker. After the Minister of Finance, it would be very logical to give floor to the Minister of Economic Development, so that I wouldn't be blamed for being partial to someone. So, do you think that it's consistent with the digital economy of Russia program? Sava Shipov, the Deputy Minister of the Economic Development. The mic, please. Yes, please, we are looking for the mic, because otherwise the translation is not possible. Thank you very much. I want to say that, as usual, any new regulation usually generates more questions than answers. I do remember all these discussions during the regulatory group meetings, and they are in charge of promoting the new regulations on digital economics. We wanted to find a balance between the demands of the business and the desire of the government to provide security and to preserve status quo. I think that the regulation that is proposed now, especially the final draft for the second reading, meets both goals. The representatives of the business are saying that this step will change their conditions of work. At the same time, it's very important to understand that adoption of this law will raise questions about its compatibility with a number of other laws which have not been amended up to now. I can quote some examples. For example, the tax code. How are we going to tax the operations involving cryptocurrencies? No one has the answer to this question. And I think it's a very important issue, a very important question. A lot depends on it. Second, everything that is related to the civil legal relations. You know that, you probably know that we're preparing the amendments to the civil code in the second reading with the possibility of smart contracts. And this is step number one. But then it causes another question. the inheritance, how are they going to be inherited? Or, for instance, how are you going to confiscate these assets? We need to ensure the rights of the citizens. We need to be sure that the justice, our justice, will be ready to deal with the digital assets, financial digital assets, and the evidence that is going to be produced, pro or con the turnover. And of course, we need another law, and the Ministry for Economic Development is in charge of it, the crowdfunding law. This is the attraction of funds through special investment platforms, and this draft law refers directly to the investments that need to be described there. And I think that the Civil Code, the financial digital assets and crowdsourcing should be one package of laws because they are interconnected, and one needs to work simultaneously on all the three. And in conclusion, Dmitry said something very interesting. Are we going to be the fastest second if we are only working in sandboxes? You know, we are not going to be the fast second if we are only dealing with sandboxes. We need to spread it all over the country. We need to understand what are the deadlines, what are the periods that we are keeping in mind when we will cover all the territory of the country with these techniques. And what are the next steps? Can we understand the regulations that we're going to develop after the sandboxes? What is going to be step 2 that is going to expand the possibilities of our economics? Thank you very much. Just a very short comment, the fastest second. Are we going only to limit ourselves to the sandboxes? But it depends on how fast is the number one, because they are probably already out of sandboxes and past school time and the university. Then the second should also leave the sandbox. But if the fastest first is still in the sandbox, then just let's look at it. It's just an aside. We've already mentioned the word law many times, and when we mention law, then we immediately think about another respectable ministry, the Ministry of Justice. And the regulatory issue, regulation of cryptocurrencies, is one of the topics of our discussion. We've already heard lots of opinion from certain separate rules and standards, and up to the opinion of some of the lawyers that we need to change the civil code overall due to the fact that these cryptocurrencies are going to change the world, or probably will just limit ourselves to the explanatory letters from the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank. Some say that all the system should be changed because of the digital reality, and some others think that we need just to tune up this and that in some places. So I would like to ask Denis Novak, who is the Deputy Minister of Finance. Do we need to go deeper into this reality? Do we need to move into this vast realm of changing the civil code, or some amendments will be enough about the digital assets and so on? Dear friends, I will have, before I start talking about the civil code, I need to remember the criminal code as the Deputy Minister of Justice, because a lot of things are outside. By the way, That tells us something about the hierarchy of codes in the mind of the Ministry of Justice. Yes, because people come across these things when, for instance, there are criminal cases, and here because someone may have changed a cryptocurrency into rubles. Probably not all these operations are really so dangerous as to be prosecuted by criminal law, but we need to find a boundary beyond which we can speak about the public threat and criminal cases. Before this boundary, everything that is before it needs to be legalized, and we need to exert every effort to encourage it, because we all understand that it's not this fastest first or second are going to reach results. They're not going to reach any results because if they're like ostriches, gaze their heads in the sand, because that will lead to like elimination of government. The mechanism of setting these boundaries is how it is described in the civil code, all those things that we are discussing. And there is a technical question. Where are we going to describe it? Are we going to make fundamental amendments to the civil code? Are we going to focus on certain legislative acts? I'm going to speak about it later. So the Ministry of Justice thinks that the good idea of the civil code is that the general provisions, the notions and definitions that are written into the civil code, if they are not illustrated from time to time, they actually are technologically neutral. We've already mentioned it. If we take the civil code and write in it that the regulation of, for instance, the digital financial assets are only based on the distribution register are taken into account, then we're going to threaten something that may happen very quickly, the quantum revolution of next year. And probably these registers, which are time and resource consuming now, will be replaced by something else. And we have already written about it in the civil code. So the civil code, on the one hand, requires some amendments because we need to set the boundary for the criminal cases, but we need to make those amendments minimal. For instance, Article 1 to 8, it is proposed right now, but people are talking about the inclusion of the electronic signs or digital assets rights and so on should be written into this article. But if we speak about new notions like token or digital right, then we need to have references to all the rest that is written in Article 1 to 8. But the digital rights may be new property, no paper documents, property rights, and so on. So if we do it separately, then we'll break the logic of it. So then Article 128 should not be changed at all because it has an other property. But if, for instance, this distributed, registered, or other informational resources have the information about the digital rights that we're talking about it, and the rules are applied in cases of, I don't know, theft, loss, or changes in the entries, unauthorized changes in the entries, and so on. If we use the rules, the provisions from Article 143, then of course it would just expand it a bit in the civil code. Yes, we need to talk about it. And if we only make minimal amendments in the civil code, then we need to have a description in the industry codes. Do we need to have special laws about the digital assets? Or, for instance, we have added to the security law, because securities law may just be amended, and they may be included, including the description of the distributed register. And we can also cover all these topics, including those measures that need to be taken in case of the unqualified investors. They should be also part of this procedure. And the banking law should also have a provision that there may be an exchange, not the payment means, but an exchange means, and we can accept cryptocurrencies as it. That's a very interesting issue. Do we need a separate law on digital assets? We don't have a final answer, but we need to start discussing it. We cannot really have a law on digital assets per se, by itself, because we need some references to all other current laws. And also, I want to backtrack to this very beautiful metaphor of the fastest second, because it's very convenient to be the fastest second, as already been mentioned, because if you have the experience of the fastest first, and right now no country can claim the title of the fastest one, because we are practically at the same level after our simultaneous start. And if you are always the fastest second, you may turn out to be the fastest 26th. You need to take it into account as well. So this choosing between whether it is going to be part of the legal field or it should be forbidden, we should remember that if we ban it, if we forbid it, it's still going to exist, but the peculiarity of this activity is that it's part of the information environment. It's not tangible. If you don't accept it, then the government will run a huge risk. And we need to pay attention to it. We need to find the balance between the three whales that has already been mentioned that will allow us to achieve this goal. Thank you very much, Denise. And we are smoothly moving into a very important strategic choice, whether to be fast or whether to be reliable. Fast development or reliable development. Reliable development, I mean, regulation, how I understand it, need to guarantee two things. First, it should guarantee the property rights of the people, and then it should guarantee that these digital assets would not lead to something criminal, money laundering, or some other violations of the law. Now I would like to give a floor to Pavel Levadny, who is the Financial Monitoring Service Director, and ask two questions from him. How the Russian regulation is going to protect the rights of its citizens? How can you guarantee the digital assets rights? And how are you going to protect the government rights, because the government interests, so that we wouldn't have some funding of unacceptable things, terrorism and others? Thank you very much for giving floor to me. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We can speak about the money laundering systems, and which is aimed at the minimization of risks of criminal profits, is universal. And the identification of clients may be one of the tools of fighting with this system, and then the identification of the client is done by the servicing financial organization. It's a universal rule. It's all over the world, and it may be successfully used for traditional financial instruments and fiat currencies, and it can be used about digital assets.
In this regard, we are interested, not only us but also law enforcement authorities are interested in the legal field of financial assets because its usage in economy should be regulated. And we are also interested in infrastructure that makes it possible for the citizens and organizations to use these digital financial assets. Electronic money providers, platforms that trade cryptocurrency for real currency, because we cannot leave this sector of market unregulated. It is being actively developing, and we have to monitor it if we want to avoid related risks. A separate topic is regulating platforms from the point of view of creating mechanisms of customer identification. This is identification of customers who use digital financial assets. We believe that the system adopted by each and every region of the Russian Federation is based on FATF regulations. However, in the area of digital financial assets, we do not have such regulations, though FATF has been actively discussing the mechanisms of establishing such rules and regulations. I'm part of those discussions, and I believe that in the near future the corresponding standards will be in place. I believe that the organizations that provide financial services related to digital financial assets will be recognized as a full-fledged segment of financial market from the point of view of FATF formats. In this regard, they will have to be registered. They will require legal status in each and every national jurisdiction, including the jurisdiction of the Russian Federation, and they will have to abide the rules on anti-money laundering regime. It means they will have to identify their clients. Second possible variant that we do not discuss today is to prohibit any sort of activities related to digital financial assets. But in today's world, this variant is faulty variant from the point of view of digital economy and from the point of view of countering cyber crimes. We will not discuss it whatsoever. That is why our issue is to regulate legal status of the organizations that provide services related to digital financial assets, exchange platforms, and providers of internet wallets. What sort of a system should it be? Should it be a registering system or a system based on issuing permits? We do not know yet, but we have our ideas, and we believe that FATF standards will be adopted very soon. We have to be ready to make those new organizations subject to law. We have to be ready to make them abide the regulations that we will develop, because this system, the system of digital financial assets, was developed to escape financial regulation. And the corresponding beliefs and psychology was formed around it. Those structural elements and digital assets are quite often used for criminal purposes. Today, we know for sure that they are used in drug trafficking. These assets are quite popular in this criminal area. So, law enforcement authorities and Rosfin monitoring will have to perform effective and rapid work in order to create the corresponding infrastructure. And after that, we'll find an adequate answer to many of your questions. We will protect the law-abiding users of new financial interests, and we will also protect the interests of state and society. And I believe there are areas where the interests of citizens and interests of government are absolutely the same. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. You have touched upon an interesting topic. I've read at multiple forums that this infrastructure initially was established in order to escape state regulation. Well, sometimes it's done with better purposes because, for example, many governments impose too many regulations on IPO market. That is why for many companies it's very difficult to make the initial public offer and to enter stock exchange. And not many companies can afford it. In this regard, ICO mechanism is less expensive and more convenient in this regard. And the bill that I have seen is aimed at making an easy IPO possible. But on the other side, you are absolutely correct in saying that there is a wide range of activities that government is regulating and is entitled to do so. That is why it is important to find this sort of balance between easy and light regulation in the areas where the activity should be increasing, and at the same time to regulate the area in order not to let various activities leave the framework of our legal field. We know that various countries deal with these issues in various manners. That's why I'd like to give the floor to the leader of the Center of Strategic Development. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. This forum would be a dead forum if we fail to pronounce the words blockchain and cryptocurrency. Just have a look of what is going on in Russia, what official documents are in place, a couple of regulations from central bank, and that's it. That is why we believe that our government is behaving as usual, so when some new activities emerge, we do not notice them, and after all, we just right away start to use our criminal code. However, what we deal with is the new reality. The turnover of cryptocurrencies is increasing immensely, and cryptocurrency is employed as payment means. Russian citizens buy real assets and pay for them by cryptocurrency. This is what we have. Second characteristic feature of this new reality is that ICO is a new means of attracting investment. From 2014 to 2017, they attracted somewhat 3 billion rubles. This is a real tool of attracting investment, though our government pretends that it does not exist. Few people understand how to work with cryptocurrencies, how to register them, how to keep accounts, how to pay taxes, when to pay taxes when you use cryptocurrency. All these issues are outside the legal field. And the third characteristic feature of the reality is that Russia is not very attractive for this new infrastructure and for these activities. However, 1/3 of all the operations with cryptocurrency worldwide are performed by Russian citizens or ex-Russian citizens. Cryptocurrencies bring new threats and challenges. The major threats are quite clear. Leading countries have been discussing this agenda for 5 years or so. First, as emission monopoly, and the countries cannot make it happen. And apart from those separate cases where countries decided to establish positive circumstances for the sectors, the states will try to fight it, will try to combat it, because nobody wants to lose control of the turnover. The second risk is actually a whole bulk of public risks that have to be regulated and solved. Terrorism, money laundering, tax evasion, breaches of legislation on securities and organizations. The operations that go on now violate the existing legislation because there are many norms and rules that are violated. And finally, we cannot that easily deal with scoundrels and people who violate law and who try to violate law against investors. One of the major questions now is asset or currency. Some countries choose assets for a number of reasons in order to employ general civil legislation. And the legislation bill that is under revision now deals with this decision, and I believe that this is correct. Digital asset can be regulated throughout the legislation. Then we have to define what is our take of deals. It is clear, and our colleague from Rosfin Monitoring mentioned it, if we talk about exchange of cryptocurrency for normal currency, we'll get identification, extraterritorial character, which is Russian citizens will have to report their deals, despite of the jurisdiction where they perform those deals, and we will have information disclosed. This is a consensus of global practice. We expect the decisions of FATF, and we will see how they are going to be adopted in Russian legislation. As for exchange cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency, it is disputable. Somebody stands for full set of regulation, even for those who exchange cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency and not for real money. This is a hard decision. However, it is possible. Another extreme case is not to regulate, unless real sector and real money is concerned. This is the crossroads that have to be passed. What to do in Russia? Eliminate public risks. Legislation to counter money laundering, terrorism financing, introduction of identification of customers. I believe that lawmakers understand that too good. I would like to underscore the topic of legislation, general character, universal character. I believe that digital financial assets should be listed among general assets. There have to be some explanations of how to pay VAT, how to work with separate operations. We need explanations and information about operations at stock exchanges, and in part of ICO we need soft practices and what relates to responsible business making, what is the checklist of activities that have to be performed and that have to be presented to people who participate in financing this ICO. This is a consensus. And as for Rapid Second, it is not about do we have or don't have legislation on this idea. So far, we have not been Rapid Second, we have been Rapid Last. And many countries worldwide and CIS countries have been establishing soft frameworks and soft restrictions over recent 5 years already, and we have a long way to perform until we reach it. Thank you so much. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Yuri Pripachkin, President of the Russian Association of Cryptocurrency and Blockchain. Could you please focus on how to implement the latest technologies and the perspective of their usage in order to attract investment, because this is the main goal put forward by our policy makers in order to make ICO a safe tool to attract investment. And it can be much easier than emission of classical securities. Thank you for giving the floor to me. I represent here the structure that is the aim of those activities. I have been listening to what was said, and I believe there are two different stories. Introduction of digital technologies to analog economy. Analog economy has been built around an individual, a bank, a person, a government probably. What has happened with technology in course of recent years? There are new entities that are built across and around an individual that holds a gadget in his hands. And what has been said on how to escape the interests of government has not been quite true. What has happened because of the economy of digital profiles. And this story is supranational. It goes beyond national borders, and what happens now happens in a bigger world of crypto economy, which is a second constituent part of economy. So first part is digital economy in analog world. This is introduction of digital economies to medicine, education, transportation. And the second part is digital economy that is built around digital profiles, around the services that have to do with analog economy and change the nature of this economy. And any attempts to implement national regulation here would probably fail. And the ideology and strategy of rapid second will lead to a strategy of rapid dead second, because the one who will is the one who collects the information on the economy of digital profiles. This is not much evaluated in the society and globally in the world, but let us have a look at the situation where companies do not pay attention to the existing legislation and invest in companies that work where actually the service is. This is the global practice, and the race between regulators is a race to get this tie between property rights and digital profile. And the second story is how the economy is going to be built around this digital profile, who will organize the connection crypto to national currency. This industry cannot be treated as a new oil and gas industry. It cannot be regulated in the same manner, because if this industry is not satisfied with the legislation where it exists, it will choose another legislation. We have no representatives of central bank here. They're all in Sochi. Well, yes, I understand. And we cannot fully discuss everything, whereas they're present. But in case State Duma adopts a piece of legislation and the industry does not want it, this industry will escape the country. The platforms will be located on the area of other countries, taxation will be collected in other places. This is a major risk, which is undervalued so far. However, we have to pay attention to it, because we want the system to work in our country. We want Russian economy to breach the gap that is present, and we have to to bear in mind that Russian community is among top 3 nations that deal with cryptocurrencies and blockchains. Take the story with Telegram, where government tried to regulate the operation of this service, but they failed miserably. The question is how to do so that the industry remains here. Well, it has to be self-regulated. Second, crypto fiat connection have to be controlled, and this is actually quite easy. We plan to register crypto fiat on the basis of taxation service and to relate it to personal data of each and every person. That is why the wallet will be in place. We also have to solve the issue on trade platforms that have to pay taxes. We understand that crypto users from all over the world are interested in it because to clear up money and to introduce them to fiat economy is what is very interesting for them. And cryptocurrency correlates with fiat currency. However, it solves many of the existing problems in a different manner. So the task can be performed. We do respect the task of amending the legislation, but at the same time we'd like to urge you to understand that national legislation plays a second role here, whereas the fulfillment of conditions for cryptocurrency, for sandboxes, will be game changers. Probably some of you attended a workshop by Central Bank on sandboxes, and everyone was quite disappointed after it because there was not a word said about cryptocurrency. And actually they dealt with only analogous stories. And secondly,
when we're talking that they don't have the payment means at the level of the central bank, it's just nonsense, because we all know that they do have payment means at the central bank. Any program of loyalty with blockchain, this is private money. So the central bank is just losing control of the money emission, and that's why they're afraid, because private money is all over the world. You can just Google it, private money. So the central bank is just afraid of losing control. Or for instance, if you take the loyalty card, you can pay for your you can pay in duty-free, Global's, Gourmet. You can pay for your tickets. So it's also money. This is the customer loyalty card, and this is equal to money. And it is the money that is supported by real goods, real services, different from paper money. I'm already, time is money, I'm wrapping up. So that's why I want to call upon the community. You're investing your resources, money, intellect into it. That's why we need to create the new system of coordinate around the crypto economy, smart contracts, because no one understands fully that it's something that essentially will change the economic situation, economic relations. We don't like financial assets term, because this is one of the aspects of, for instance, tokens and cryptocurrency. For instance, Coil of Google, it's the platform. So any photo taken with Kodak is part of the intellectual right system, and you can have royalty for it. So this is the protection of intellectual rights, which is not financial asset, but it's also the element of an economy that the world economy is going to build on. So we are moving into a different realm. Let's think about it. It's the digital profile, smart contract, blockchain, cryptocurrencies. It's a different story if they say that blockchains are not to be used with analog channels. Yes, of course, that is correct. But it's all about trust. That's it. I think that the CBR concerns really have some ground, because yes, you've already taken some of their money and some of their time. You already exceeded your time frame. I will give you, at the end of this session, I will give you 1 minute each to wrap up and to state your conclusions, even about the CBR. Now, Sergei Polikhanov, the same question. What is the new, how do you understand this reality, the new reality, and how can it be regulated? Yuri Polikhanov, who is the executive director of Sberbank SIB. You already covered the market for IT technologies, but I don't know about the results here. Thank you very much for giving floor to me. I just want to continue on Yuri's presentation. I do agree with his main thesis. Are we ready to be the leaders in digital economy? If we are ready, then we cannot use the old regulations for these new methods, because we cannot build the new financial systems using the regulatory principles that we are used to. And the second point is that what is the main achievement of blockchain and digital economic crunching? When you can attract a lot of capital for their development without the old resources, you need to authenticity, to prove the authenticity of the investor and protect their rights. Do we need new legislation? Yeah, we do. But the capital needs to come here, because what we have prepared now is not competitive as far as the attraction of foreign capital and investors to our crypto economies is concerned. That's why what we're creating now is just for the paper tick, and that's it. We have adopted something, and we don't care whether it will have good consequences. The second one, why are we doing it? Blockchain actually has the elements of the new economic system, the new financial architecture. In which way? It allows at the same technological level to connect the financial asset and the settlement payment instrument. You don't need intermediary, you don't need a depository, you don't need a bank. Everything happens within the same technological space. That's the innovation character of this process. And if we don't understand this token, the clearance or settlement token, then we'll have separately a financial asset and token. But we need to cover other processes, repos, guarantees, credit. We are working on the blockchain and financial repo. We're going to use the blockchain. If we can use the crypto asset as the payment instrument, then the process, which takes several days now, will take several seconds. Everything will be within the smart contract. Trader will become unnecessary in this day-to-day process, because we only need a code. But in order to launch this process, we need regulatory basis. Thank you for a very brief presentation of your position, and it's very important how the broad masses of population are reacting to this or that instrument. That's why I want to give floor to Guzeli Imaeva, General Director of the National Agency for Financial Research. I know that you had some very interesting social surveys, and I want to hear from you what is the attitude to financial assets. Thank you very much, Vladimir. This is a very interesting subject, the attitude of the public to this, to blockchain and so on. We started this project 4 years ago, and some people looked strangely at us. while you're discussing such difficult topics. Why? So what do we see now? What is the key idea now? The subject of the cryptocurrencies is a huge information bubble. We've already looked at the mass media, and only during the past year, the information about it increased 200 times, and even some myths appeared there. If you understand cryptocurrencies, you'll become a millionaire instantly. And people who didn't use to invest with traditional instruments, my personal example, for instance, I took part in the Russian Internet Week. There were like 4 times more people than we're having now. And when I asked who uses the traditional investment instruments, there were like 10 or 15 hands. And I asked about cryptocurrencies, bitcoins, and so on. There was just a forest of hands. I just want to quote some numbers. At the end of last year, the information level was like 20% of all Russian citizens. They knew what it is. We haven't checked this year. Who was most interested in that? 5 million people were really systemically following this story, mostly young males up to 25 years. Well, about 5 million. And of course, we were interested in. We've been involved in the financial literacy program for a long time. We wanted to understand whether they are aware of the risks that they may face. And speaking about the basics of the financial literacy is understanding of the ratio of risk and profitability. So we ask questions. How do you evaluate the profitability? And only 25% answered correctly. A lot of people just thought that it was a highly profitable tool, instrument with very high reliability. But that's the risk area, as we discovered. And the situation is aggravated by the very low digital literacy. We also had a survey about the computer illiteracy, and about 1/4 of the population has the basic digital literacy. And if we're talking about critical thinking primarily, the possibility of understanding the risks coming from the informational environment, this aspect, the digital literacy, it should be integrated into the part of the national strategy for fighting financial illiteracy. And there is a very interesting case that I read about. It was about the young Americans who are already really well aware of the cryptocurrencies and so on, but they are buying, instead of paying for their education, they're using their funds to pay for the cryptocurrencies, and they say, okay, they're born to be digital, they're born, Generation Z, digital natives and so on, and there is an idea that they have this literacy, but it's wrong. It's a fallacy. This is something that needs to be taught. You cannot be born into it. It's like we are learning how to write, read, and calculate. We are not born with these abilities. We're having a financial forum now. So if we're talking about the protection of the consumer rights in the financial assets, 88% of our population don't know how to protect their rights, whom they can appeal. And the level of trust to the financial institutions is dropping dramatically. So if a person who is not financially literate comes across new financial instruments and doesn't trust them, it's also a distrust to the overall system of financial assets in the state. So we need education here, and as step one, we need to raise this issue, and we need to make it part of the national strategy of financial literacy. Thank you very much, Guzel. You outlined this problem very well, and we have a person who can answer these questions. This is Sergei Makarov, who is the Deputy Director of Financial Literacy Center, and he's going to speak about how we can promote the digital literacy, what is done by Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm going to speak with my back to you, sorry. We're the National Center of Financial Literacy. We're in cooperation with the Ministry of Finance to enhance the financial literacy of the public. And our task is to teach them how to manage their assets, covering as much of the population as possible. In this respect, why are we doing it? It is done because we want to increase the quality of life of our public, and our task, our goal, is just part of the trend that has already been described here. We noted two great state initiatives with broad public coverage. It's the pension reform, one of them. Whenever you mention pension reform, everyone stumbles. The mic just failed because, yeah, I don't know what to do. Just don't mention, your mic broke down when you mentioned the pension reform. No, I was talking about the individual investment accounts. This is something that was started 3 years ago. A lot of people are informed about it, and we see that the accounts are on the rise. The number of the accounts are on the rise. A lot of people are interested in it. We need to take it into account. But here, we are talking about the digital literacy and financial literacy. My background is IT and finance, and I try to explain about computers and finance to various people to understand that it's a problem squared, because you need to teach one, you need to teach the other, and then you need to teach the combination. So during this session, I've jotted down some points, not the solutions, but 3 trends, 3 directions that we can move to. The first is that the information should be aimed at something that will not make the life of people deteriorate, because, if they invest bitcoins, if they mortgage their housing in order to buy bitcoins, it's not a good idea. This is what Yana spoke about, that we need to protect the rights of non-qualified investors. Second, we need to explain how the digital assets work. It's like explanation of what is the stock, shares, futures, coins, and so on. But for the people in Saratov, they all swear words. You need to have a very long talk about it. And number 3, you need to explain the legislation, how it is regulated, especially when we're talking about the changes in the tax code, the civil code, and, of course, the criminal code. These 2 things, I want to repeat again. First, protect them from risks, protect them from losses, because the hype is very high about it. Then explain how it works, and then explain how it is regulated. Thank you very much. And we have some people who were late for our session. And, of course, they need to be fined because they were late. This is Alexei Moiseev, the Deputy Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation. He's the person who has missed most of our discussion, so he's just the person to summarize the results, and you can ask him questions. Alexei? Thank you very much. I'm sorry I chased away Yana because there is only one seat. I'm sorry I was late. It's too bad that we cannot use cryptocurrency to finish the housing building for those who were deceived, swindled. That's why I think that we need to discuss the paper cryptocurrencies and make them available in all the CIS countries. Sorry about being late. I haven't heard what you've been talking about, but I want to probably reiterate the concept of the Ministry of Finance, which is supported by everyone, regulation of cryptocurrencies. The first, it's after the G20, people are saying, everyone was saying that we don't know how to regulate, don't regulate it at all because we don't know how to regulate, we'll do something wrong. If you don't know how to protect yourself against risks, I think that it has been mentioned already. Pavel probably has already mentioned it. We all know that, of course, if you use digital assets, it's a mass activity right now. And of course, the financial customers and everything that is reflected in our legislation, the mandatory identification, the electronic signature of the person who is collecting the money, and so all these elements are a must. Otherwise, we've been building this system since 1973, I think, basic Russian. This system is the same age as me, and if we take this system and if we say that, okay, cash and banking operations are regulated and all the rest should not, it's wrong. So we cannot afford it. No government can afford it.
There is the rule, know your client, know who you work with, and the understanding of the economic essence of your activity is vital. This is for one thing. Second, protection of your customers. Mr. Aksakov, who had to fly for Saratov, he said that there was an information that 90% of all ICO are organized by scoundrels. Well, probably not 90% of them, but a share of such faulty ICOs is quite high. And I believe that now we see the results of it, and we'll see the results in a year or in a two, and people who are deceived now will understand that they have really been deceived. They will come into us and say that they were deceived, and they would blame Ministry of Finance and Central Bank. So wait for a new category of citizens to emerge. That is why we have to protect our citizens and to protect them sometimes from what they do, because they have to have an understanding of what they do. If a person buys a crypto wallet, they have to understand what it is about. For them, it's just one click of agreement. I believe that nobody uses to read those lengthy explanations and agreements. I believe that at least we have to give an opportunity to read those agreements if people want to. We have just discussed security of banking cards, and we said that we cannot prohibit to write down your PIN codes on your plastic card, but what we can do is to explain why it shouldn't be done. That is why last year on RBK there was a TV show saying that one Bitcoin should cost $10 million at least. Well, probably it will cost so, but so far it's a different story. That is why there are risks that investors do not understand what they buy, and as a result they lose their money. However, the Russian Federation wants this money to be assigned and allocated to financial market and to invest in the economy. That is why we want to save this money out of economic prospects. We want them to be useful, we want them to be spent on, for example, ICOs, on positive ICOs, because in this case our economy will as well be developing. So our position is built on those two pillars: protection from money laundering and protection of users from buying financial assets that they do not understand. And I believe that all the other aspects should not be regulated at this stage, at least. Thank you, colleagues. You have a unique opportunity to ask your questions to any of our panelists. Look, regulate real currency. Well, how? If you read a law on securities, what you see there? You see regulations, what you can do, what you cannot do. You see the details, the peculiarities, the whole mechanism. However, let us think why ICO emerged. What is ICO as I understand? These are people who are desperate, who cannot attract money, attract funds by any other means. I do not take into account scoundrels or swindlers, just people who want to build something useful. They cannot attract money. Where should they go? There is an advertising about small business and board of this big bank. This is a joke, but only partly. We all know that this is really a problem, even in developed Western jurisdictions, because a small business cannot start an IPO, because it takes a lot of time and it requires a lot of money, and sometimes the economic interest is not sufficient to do so. Does it mean that we have to send all the companies to IPO? No. But what to do then? Especially in our conditions, in our environment, what should a small enterprise do in order to attract funds? ICO is an option here. Because ICO is a concept that each one can afford, that is available in any region of our country, and if it is organized properly, good money can be attracted. So this is a real option. Certainly there are risks. And we do not have representatives of central bank here, but still I will say there is a proposal. Let us emit crypto ruble. But what is a crypto ruble? We have an emission center for a single currency. This is a well-established practice, and it means that there can be no alternative emission center. There were some ideas that were reflected in the bill that we prepare, but there is a footnote that the ultimate regulator's role is held by central bank. The idea is that we do not go for foreign currency, but we say that if you want to produce your goods and services in Russia, you have to go through a special procedure of authentication, of identification. Where do people trade? How do people trade? What platforms do they use? As long as it's It remains within cryptocurrencies. We cannot regulate it. If we try to and they don't like it, they just move out to Belarus. Thank you. I have a question. Initially I had a question and the panelists managed to answer it. However, this one is for Mr. Moiseev about ICO, which is a good means to raise funds. There is statistics that says that 80% of it is scam. And the question is, we create a new entity, digital assets. We discuss it in a serious manner, and I was pleased to listen to speech by Mr. Novak. However, we started this discussion about rapid first, rapid second, and how can we be this rapid second without establishing new global practices. Whereas, in fact, rapid firsts are already in place, and they are rapid not because they were the first to invent this regulation. They were the first to understand what they want this regulation for, and they built parallels with the existing worlds. And they understood that this was either a prepayment for good service or a security or a means of payment. We understand that it cannot be used here as a means of payment because we have a single emission center, so two options remains: prepaid payment or security. However, what holds us from this approach? Why do we have to create an institution, then develop a charter, codex, a subcode, subcode for it? I believe this is a question for Mr. Moiseev. I will start. It was one of our first remarks to the first version of bill that suggests that we should introduce a notion of token that will presuppose that one does not have to disclose all the information, and at the same time this term does not distinguish between various kinds of tokens. However, we know that they can be utilitarian tokens as prepayments, and they can be real securities. We pointed out that the advantage of such approach is that the user of this legal information will not have to think what sort of token do they have and how to use it, either as a security or in a different way. However, on the other side, it decreases the needed regulatory element that creates risks at the market of real securities. If we say that ICO is the same thing in same volumes with same risks and with same requirements, that is what puzzles us. I believe we have to think about differentiation. Somewhere it exists in such volumes and it does not differ from the practice adopted with security, and probably there we have to leave it as it is. But in some places we have to regulate to limit the sums of the volume and to solve the existing problem in this way. I was sure that I will regret that I now sit in this place because I believe that the previous speaker would speak better than me about federal laws. And the question now is how to word it, how to formulate. Now we formulate it as property rights. There is an approach. Give it whatever name you like, but remember the goal that you have. I understand the position of my colleagues, where they say that there are various securities, emission, debt ones, and what is the name for this division that we are going to invent? We can think of a new name. However, basically, today, coins are bought for fiat or for something else. But in any case, it is something that has real value. And finally, there are jurisdictions where those deposits are traded, they're issued, signed, and that they can be traded at the market. And there are some absurd markets where this is possible. Remember about French kings that traded the deposits at stock exchanges, and people had to check whether they really signed it or not. We have chosen another way. We regulate. And here Ministry of Justice is probably correct that this is a lame approach, but we regulate it from the point of view of economic essence. There was a bill on crowdfunding, and we believe that this is also a new process, a new economic process which did not exist before. Actually, there are many activities that we can name crowdfunding, but still, we prefer to think that crowdfunding now is raising funds in social networks for any projects. There is a special law on it and a division, a subdivision, dedicated to coins. Probably we could do it in a different manner, but, well, so it happened, and it's difficult to say why we preferred to write it this way and not another way. This is a complicated matter, and recommendation of G20 is to leave it as it is. Central Bank of Canada presented their report and finished it with the words, "Let us do nothing." But we cannot do nothing because in some time people will come into us and say, well, you see, we bought something and received no money for that later on. But, well, you see, European Union, Malta, many countries do something about it. And we do not have to be the first about adopting legislation, right? And we do not talk about it. If you train your monkey to go to the theater with you, you can do it, but what monkey is it and why should it go to the theater is a separate issue. What I'm driving at is that we have to observe some norms and regulations, some norms of etiquette, if you want. In the new law, we could not leave it as it is. We could not leave it undescribed. And we chose a sort of definition, a word, and if the Ministry of Justice corrects it, well, all right. Let us talk about Belarus. It is the only country in the world that really invented this new essence, and I believe we do not have to follow it. I agree. You know, there are countries with precedent law where there are no laws but are court decisions. And there are already such court decisions on rights related to bitcoins and the evaluation that is given to this practice in countries with precedent law system. Such cases already start to develop, and even Russia already develops precedents about it. Just remember, somebody wanted to be declared as a bankrupt or got divorced, and they could not decide whether they needed bitcoins for. Whether they could be declared as a bankrupt if they had their assets in bitcoins. Well, you know, I tried to imagine this situation, and the legal advisor of this man trying to prove that the that they had no property because all the property was invested in bitcoins. I might understand the arguments of another side, but, well, it's quite complicated. But we have a program product in our system. Do you agree with it? Well, colleagues, thank you so much for your inputs, but we are violating our framework, so let us ask another question, a very short one. I have a question for Alexei. What is your comment of a conversation to establish a single emission center using blockchain technology? Back in the USSR, there was a foreign currency ruble that was controlled by specialized accounts, and actually it played the role of crypto ruble. Yes, but it was not a currency, it was an exchange ruble. And during the collapse of Soviet Union, those rubles were traded, you know, in underpasses here in Moscow. We have a lengthy discussion here. Well, I present several short concepts. We have only one emission center, Central Bank of Russian Federation, 70-something article of our constitution that says that we have only one emission center. And this is the practice that we are not going to abandon. There is electronic ruble in various electronic wallets and internet currency. Now we stay at the stage which makes it possible for any legal entity or individual go to Moscow Stock Exchange, buy rubles there, and do whatever they want. And those actions are quite clear because the system is distributed, and if the system is not distributed, there is another system of relations. And at the current level of technology development, those technologies of central banks revise payments faster than we can think. I believe that probably there could be another practice, but the technology of distributed registers is not sufficient and ready for that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I promised that I will give the floor to all of our panelists. Please be brief. Say 1 or 2 sentences as conclusion. What can you say to the participants of our Moscow Financial Forum in terms of cryptocurrencies? What are your forecasts for the next year, probably for the incoming 10 years? But I believe that life as world is rapidly developing, and if we think something is going to happen in 10 years, it might actually happen tomorrow. So what is your take of what's going to be pressing next year? Probably it's just a sort of hype legislation approved, a couple of ICOs happen in our country, and then get forgotten. So the floor is yours. Ms. Guzeyeva starts. If we talk about the future, you have 20 seconds. We will talk more and more about protection of user rights, because each hype event creates many scoundrels, many law breaches, many illicit practices that want to use this vulnerability of user. We had a cat who asked, what is cryptocurrency? 47% of Russians think that this is a temporary fashion, and 30% of them think that this is currency of the future. Yes, Sergey, I want Russia to be leader in digital economy. I believe it's possible. However, it's not possible to live without risks, without fears, and sometimes risks are thought of. When we talk about elderly ladies who invest in bitcoins, I do not believe in it because it is so difficult to register electronic wallet. And there were stories about gypsies who sold golden coins saying that these were bitcoins. Another interesting moment when we talk about investment policy. If a startup at ICO is viewed by investors and they say it's not scam, why can't they enter the market and invest? I stand for innovative approach. I have a very simple contribution. When all of you talk about the risks of contribution, I talk about the risks of non-contribution. Of non-contribution of this practice of smart contract that unites money and contracts. This practice is the digital future, and the countries that fail to do so will be digital slaves. They will be slaves to digital platforms that are located in other jurisdictions. This process goes on, and even if our central bank says that there is no means to conduct payment, such payments still are conducted, and to ignore it means to make our country a digital slave. That is why I ask our leaders to be serious about it. Well, we understand your point. Thank you. Next. Despite the position of our government, the output of buying and selling cryptocurrency will increase on yearly basis, and instead of 2 or 3 billion ICOs, we'll have 20, 30 billion ICOs by 2020. That is why government has to make up its mind on regulation, and I hope that it will be soft regulation. For anti-laundering system, it is not principally important, the essence of a financial organization. What is important is monitoring, control, and identification of clients, and I believe that we are going to develop in this regard. Denis? I hope that our human capacity will help us. I believe in the active citizens of our country that can use these technologies, that can enhance the living standard in Russia, that can invest in positive startups and so on. As for the legislation to create the user-friendly environment, that would be a unique opportunity. Despite sanctions, despite limitations, despite boundaries, if such a platform is created, we will have immense economic effects. And I hope that next year at this economic forum, we analyze the information of Rosstat and of our economic indicators of how much of it was invested in our real economy.
Alexei? There used to be a phrase, don't interfere with my work, let me work. So, and behave. Don't launder the money, don't deceive your customers. This is what the Ministry of Finances is for, because we've been hearing that the government is pressing on us, suppressing us and so on. Behave, and you can do whatever you like. Dmitry, you set up a really wonderful framework, and now you need to wrap up. First, the digital financial assets are forever. It's not a fashion of today. Yes, we need to be ambitious. We need to set up ambitious goals, but the hype should be controlled, managed. It shouldn't be just let into all the heads. Don't deceive, don't lie to each other, don't falsify facts and so on. Otherwise, you won't be able to digest them. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Just before lunch, bon appetit to everyone, and I want to thank all our wonderful speakers.
Думаю, не один.
Я посидеть.
Что?